It's a match made in hell. Serial killers who murder as a team.
We have two people who individually might never really commit this kind of crime, but sometimes form this very, very toxic partnership.
Sometimes one is the psychological leader, the other a compliant accomplice.
That one is the dominant driving force, and the other acting out of love, or is acting out of loyalty or fear.
Often, they are a romantic couple, driven by deviant sexual thrills.
You find these couples who get into serial murder as a form of a really grotesque, horrific form of sex play to spice up their lives by abducting and torturing victims.
So a lot of times these are motivated by somebody trying to have an apprentice in a way where they're leading them on, they're showing them the ropes, and that alone gives them pleasure. They feel good about it. And in some cases, it's because they actually need the help.
What causes such a murderous defect in the human psyche? Now, the voices and visions of serial killers take us deep inside their complex and twisted minds. These are the legendary English moors, the vast open grasslands of the United Kingdom. Like the remote American deserts, forests, and lakes, these beautiful landscapes are ideal for hiking, camping, and experiencing nature. They are also isolated spots where sometimes criminal acts evade detection and serial killers hide their victims. Forensic investigators and volunteers are searching the area known as Saddleworth Moor, near Manchester. They are hunting for the body of Keith Bennett. Keith was the third victim of the serial killer team known as the Moors Murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. From 1963 to 1965, Brady and Hindley kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered 5 children, ranging in age from 10 to 17. Keith Bennett was just 12 years old when he was killed. Keith's family had been looking for Keith's remains for nearly 40 years with the help of many volunteers.
There's no way I'm going to give up. No ways.
I will not rest. I will not stop until Keith's home or until I physically cannot do it.
The search is frustrating. Essentially, it's like finding a very tiny needle in a gigantic haystack. Surprisingly, from prison, Myra Hindley has sent them directions for where to search for the body. She's provided a sketchy map to help them find Keith. Myra claims she stood lookout on a ridge while Brady took Keith deep into a gully to brutalize and murder the youngster. Nevertheless, the search is leading nowhere.
The moor itself is a difficult place. People do not understand that. Finding things up there is hard and difficult, as our task so far has proven.
It's been a big change down there. I would think it'd be nearly impossible to remember where he'd buried anything.
Hindley has agreed to assist in the search, hoping this will enhance her case to be released from prison early. In 1966, she and Brady were convicted of murder and given life sentences. Over 20% of serial killers operate with an accomplice. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady are classic examples of this breed of deadly duo.
Often you will find these pairs who seem to be examples of what criminologists sometimes call a folie à deux. Folie à deux is a French term meaning a madness shared by two people, but now it's more generally applied to a kind of crime where you have two people who individually might never really commit this kind of crime, but sometimes form this very, very toxic partnership.
Sometimes there's the main person, such as in the case of Ian Brady, who used his girlfriend, Myra Hindley, to lure children to a very remote place where Ian would then strangle the little child and record the screams of the strangling child on a tape recorder, which he would then use later as a kind of sexual turn-on for him and Myra later in the evening.
The Moores murderers first met when Myra Hindley went for a job interview at a small chemical company in Manchester called Millwoods Merchandise. Ian Brady was working there as a shipping clerk. She was immediately attracted to the tall, handsome, but strange young man. According to reports, Brady was interested in pornography as a schoolboy. He was also very cruel, torturing kittens to see how long they took to die, and his psyche remained the same long after his capture.
And Ian Brady was simply sadistic, a very awful person.
He didn't show remorse at all. What he did show, that he was someone who was quite determined to do the things he did. He was quite sober in a sense as to what he was saying, and I just felt that he was very ill.
For their first date, Ian takes Myra to the movies to see Judgment at Nuremberg, a film about the Nazi war trials after World War II. He introduces her to the writings and recordings of Adolf Hitler, as well as sexual sadistic works of the Marquis de Sade. The couple becomes inseparable. They make a good team. He's socially awkward, but she's just the opposite, and they both share a fascination for sadistic cruelty. In prison, Myra pens hundreds of letters to her mother, along with an unpublished autobiography. And these writings offer rare insight into the minds of a serial killer team. In her writings, Myra claims Ian indoctrinated her for over a year and a half to the idea of her being his accomplice in murder.
That does seem to happen often with these team killers, that one is the dominant driving force and the other draws a kind of a sense of purpose, or is acting out of love, or is acting out of loyalty or fear or sort of for the other individual, and so can sometimes be a rather heinous person themselves.
In her letters, Myra describes Brady's better side and how she enjoyed relaxing times in the country in places Ian had visited on his motorbike. These were days of tranquility for her, and she treasured the time they spent together, always hoping for a normal domestic life. But any possibility of a normal life disappears on July 12, 1963, when Myra offers 16-year-old Pauline Reed a ride in her van. She tricks her into going to Saddleworth Moor to help her look for an expensive lost glove. Ian follows on his motorbike. When they arrive, Ian takes Pauline onto the moor, rapes her, and cuts her throat. Myra Hindley claims she was not present during this or any of the other murders. But despite the claims she makes in these later writings, Myra continues as an accomplice in the next murders.
There are some cases of a tag team serial killer group where one person is often leading the efforts and another person is sort of assisting in the serial killing role. So a lot of times these are motivated by somebody trying to have an apprentice in a way where they're leading them on, they're showing them the ropes, and that alone gives them pleasure. They feel good about it. And in some cases, it's because they actually need the help.
When you have two partners that are killing together and one is sort of afraid of their cover being blown, and so is the other one, what happens is that when the two engage in these acts together, they then protect one another's secret, because if you turn on me, I'll turn on you, and so forth. So you develop a kind of a handshake, that you're going to protect one another's secret. And that creates an intimacy that, in a bizarre way, is almost like a kind of a love for some people. Letting that one person in on your twisted secret kind of a thing.
4 months after the murder of Pauline Reed, the couple offers 12-year-old John Kilbride a lift home. But they take a detour to Saddleworth Moor. When they reach the moor, Brady takes Kilbride with him while Hindley waits in the car. He sexually assaults the boy and slits his throat with a 6-inch serrated knife before strangling him with a shoelace. Over the next 2 years, the killer couple murders 3 more children: Keith Bennett, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans, who was 17.
They've murdered someone, life is life. But in her case, it's 5 children. 5 little children. I mean, killing an adult is bad enough, isn't it? But not 5 little harmless children like that. We've had a lot of heartache for a long, long time. And it'll never ever stop. The heartache never goes away.
Myra Hindley always claims she was never there when the children are killed. Although in the courtroom, a tape recording of Myra Hindley shouting at a 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey not to spit out a gag provides a key piece of evidence in her conviction. Leslie Ann's mother is in the courtroom when the tape is played. She has to endure hearing her baby pleading for mercy and crying for her mom.
She couldn't be human to stand there and let a little girl, so innocent, 10-year-old, say, please let me go home to Mummy. And just say, shut up, else I'll give you another go that died. Don't get me wrong, I hate him. But I detest her to stand by and let a little girl plead to her. Where was her motherly instincts? And she made a remark in the paper that the only thing she's sorry for that she never had any children. God forbid she did. I wanted to die in prison. I think she should die in prison. The horrific things she's done, you know. She took the most precious thing in the world away from me. My only daughter.
Now, decades after these horrific crimes, the investigators hope they can trust the twisted mind of a team serial killer. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley are serial killers who work as a team. In the 1960s, they kidnap, rape, and murder 5 children ranging in age from 10 to 17 years old. Both, only in their 20s themselves, are convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Myra claims Ian bullied her into abducting the children, and that she was never there when they were killed. To prove she's repentant, she agrees to help with the search effort. Hindley's attorney, Michael Fisher, reads her letter, claiming she will help the police.
I've received a letter, the first ever, from the mother of one of the missing children, and this has caused me enormous distress. I have agreed to help the Manchester police in any way possible, and have today identified from photographs and maps places that I know were of particular interest to Ian Brady, some of which I visited with him.
We are looking to hopefully find the graves of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett.
The families and police have been searching for almost 40 years, and now they believe they are finally on the right track. They hope Myra Hindley's guidance has been truthful. In prison, Myra has written hundreds of letters to her mother, as well as a revealing autobiography. At the heart of her autobiography lies her troubled childhood and an abusive relationship with her father. She says she hated him and depicts the man as a violent bully. Myra seems to have developed an interest in sadism early on, but when she joins forces with Ian, this interest explodes into action.
When you have this group together where they are both feeding off each other and encouraging each other, you may see just because neither of them wants to back down or say, no, I don't want to do that, they may actually commit crimes and do things that they otherwise would have never done by themselves.
Ian Brady was born in a Glasgow, Scotland slum to a single mother who gives him up for adoption when he is 4 months old. Brady is a lonely, difficult child who develops a fascination with the Nazis and sadism. Soon he turns to petty crime and burglary and ends up in prison at the age of 17. Following his release, he becomes even more of a strange loner until he meets Myra Hindley in 1961. His sadistic personality leads him to murder and a desire to document his heinous crimes with tape recordings and photographs. Brady and Hindley are eventually caught when Ian Brady makes an uncharacteristic mistake. He beats Edward Evans to death in front of Myra Hindley's brother-in-law, David Smith. After the killing, Smith alerts the police. When the police enter the house, they discover the body, and Ian Brady is arrested immediately. Over the next 3 days, officers uncover a large cache of souvenirs of the murders and evidence that links Hindley to the crimes. The photographs quickly lead the police to the bodies of Leslie Ann Downey and John Kilbride. The public is outraged over the murders. 24,000 people sign a petition demanding the couple be hanged. The 14-day trial reveals the horrendous details of the crimes, confirmed by the audio tapes and photographs. The jury finds Brady guilty of the murders of Downey, Kilbride, and Evans. The bodies of Bennett and Reed have not been found, so those cases are not included. Hindley is convicted of the Downey and Evans homicides. Both are given multiple life sentences. Over the years, the Moores murderers maintain a bond even though they serve in separate prisons. Myra's sentence indicates she cannot be paroled for 26 years, but she grows increasingly desperate to get out. Has this cunning and heartless killer convinced the world she deserves to be set free?
She's typed as the more evil of the two, when in fact all the evidence plainly points to her having a lesser role. Now for that she should indeed have been severely punished, but the two cases are to be distinguished, and yet she's got the same time in jail as Brady, who was a psychopath before he met her.
I shall find her wherever she is. I shall find her. I've said this for 20 years. That woman will not live if she comes out of prison. I know people have said they'll do it for me. I don't want that. I don't want nobody to get in trouble, especially my boys. They've got their lives to live. I'm half dead now. I'm living on pills. I will willingly do that woman in and take my punishment, and I will expect to be put in prison where I should stay until the end of my days.
The serial killer team of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley are serving life sentences for their atrocities. Myra continues to deny any involvement in the murders and cooperates with authorities. Her unwillingness to confess to any involvement makes her a figure of public loathing. Then, in the mid-1980s, 20 years after their crimes, Ian Brady tells a journalist that there are 2 other bodies buried on Saddleworth Moor. Police reopen the case. Hindley helps locate the body of Pauline Reed and also agrees to continue to help find the body of Keith Bennett.
I do know now, indeed. I've settled it quite recently which body that we're looking for there. The body, in fact, that we took from the moor earlier this week, I am now sure it's that of Pauline Reed.
Hindley finally admits her guilt.
She's confessed that she is guilty of participating in these crimes, so that she would be guilty of the crime of murder, yes.
Brady then volunteers to help as well and is taken to the morgue to help locate the last victim. The search is in vain, and some believe Brady was just trying to get another thrill by revisiting the crime scene. So what creates these depraved couples? A cutting-edge new tool is now available to allow much greater insight into the minds and motivations of all serial murderers. Radford University and Florida Gulf Coast University have created the remarkable Serial Killer Database. Researchers and students have compiled an astounding wealth of information on over 5,000 serial killers from the year 1900 through today.
Specifically, we have 186 variables related to serial killers, such as early childhood issues, parental abuse, humiliation, and we have that data from at least 5 or 6 different sources that allows us to make sure that the data is accurate and valid. And this allows us to develop a profile on serial killers relative to these factors.
As for serial killer teams, the database results show that about 22% work with an accomplice, and often the team is a man and a woman.
The research is telling us women are viewed as compliant victims and not major perpetrators, under the gender bias that women can't be as tough and as mean and rotten as men, so they must have been forced into an accomplice role here by these vicious men and so forth. So in a couple of cases, we're finding women turn state's evidence, and as a result, only receive from 10 to 15 years incarceration versus the men who ended up on death row for very similar kinds of crimes. And we're also finding that the women in some cases were far from compliant victims.
The database reveals interesting facts about the relationship between killer couple Charlene and Gerald Gallego. This team first abducted their victims, primarily teenagers. Most were kept as sex slaves before they were killed. The total count is 10 teenagers who lost their lives.
In the case, for example, of Charlene Gallego, she had an IQ of 150, was an accomplished pianist, and was extremely shrewd. Gerald Gallego, her husband, conversely, had an intelligence quotient in the double digits. And they both would simultaneously seek women as their prey. And they would choose 2 women at a time, one that suited Charlene's purposes and one Gerald's purposes. At another point, she actually left Gerald. So the capacity to leave someone under those circumstances, then followed by a decision to come back to this environment, really dilutes the suggestion that being a compliant victim really applies in this situation.
The Gallegos are arrested after a friend of their last victim witnessed the abduction and gave police the license plate number of the Gallegos' car. Gerald is sentenced to death at San Quentin State Prison, but dies in 2002 of cancer while awaiting the execution. Charlene cuts a deal with the authorities and testifies against her husband. She spends 16 years behind bars.
But there's a shift now to treating women equitably as heinous perpetrators, as opposed to just compliant victims. It's another area of research right now we're looking at.
The data shows there are also many instances of 2 men working together as serial murderers. American serial killer Henry Lee Lucas claims he has murdered hundreds of victims. In more than 100 cases, he says his partner in crime was Otis Toole.
The last count was 600. I gave over 3,000, I think 3,608 confessions, I think's what it was, of cleared homicides.
So it's a perverse version of two heads are better than one, with Otis Toole being probably psychotic, intellectually impaired, and Henry Lee Lucas, sort of being the one who was the more dominant of the two.
The two killers not only shared the thrill of killing, they sometimes raped their victims as well. Their prey included essentially anyone they ran into: hitchhikers, prostitutes, and migrant workers. And their heinous crimes even extended into other deviant sexual acts.
For example, Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, there wasn't really predominantly motivated by rape so much as a desire to commit necrophilia and cannibalism. So you had a necrophile and a cannibal working together. Otis Toole, who infamously created a barbecue sauce for eating people and all this sort of thing. They hooked up, and sort of the idea was you had two people who were getting their needs met together.
The couple is notoriously known for the murder of Adam Walsh, the 6-year-old son of John Walsh, host of TV's America's Most Wanted. Toole was the one to kill Adam after abducting him from the mall in Hollywood, Florida. 2 weeks later, a fisherman finds the boy's severed head in a canal 120 miles away near Vero Beach. It took more than 20 years before the boy's parents learned the truth from Toole's niece after the killer had died in Florida State Prison. Lucas makes several claims to be an accomplice in the murder, but he retracts them, and the police never prove his involvement. The serial killer database also reveals compelling information about the role of abusive childhoods in creating these monsters. Along with humiliation, a pattern of being bullied is also recognized in the data.
And we call that in our database teasing, which coincides with bullying. But bullying has a very serious impact on one's propensity to engage in these behaviors. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who's been bullied is going to become a serial killer. I think the key here is to look at that in conjunction with other variables.
Both Lucas and Toole were bullied by their abusive mothers.
Brutalized wasn't the name of it. I was beaten with sticks, whatever she'd get in her hand. It was a piece of stove wood, she hit me with it. If it was a rock, she hit me with it, She'd take poles and just pound the devil out of me, I've got scars all over my body from it.
Lucas's rage builds up after years of this terrible abuse, until he finally snaps and kills his own mother.
My mom was a prostitute, and she sold herself, and I was made to watch her, and it was just a life that I don't want,
And Henry Lee Lucas, who had actually necrophilically assaulted his own mother after killing her.
Hate builds up inside of a person. It takes away his reality, because all reality left me. Things that I would go around or be around just was a blank to me.
Toole's childhood was even more abusive. He was assaulted by almost every person he thought he could trust. His mother dressed him up as a girl. His older sister raped him before he turned 10, and his father, the worst of them all, prostituted him to a neighbor when he was only 5 years old. Clearly, abusive childhoods are often found in the backgrounds of teen murderers, whether it's two men or a man and a woman. One of history's most horrific killer couples began with a domineering man and his submissive teenaged wife. But over the years, she learns to become an equal partner in unspeakable evil. Serial killers who act as a team are responsible for some of the most despicable murders in the annals of crime. Sometimes the deadly duos are two men who are friends or relatives, and sometimes the couple are romantically involved, often a man and woman that get sexual thrills from their despicable homicides. Fred and Rosemary West are a married team of serial rapists and murderers who slaughter more than 16 young women beginning in the 1960s. Their gruesome signature is chopping off the fingers and toes of their victims. While Fred is still a teenager, he becomes a child molester and burglar. At 21, he marries Rena Costello and becomes stepfather to her daughter from her first marriage. They soon have a daughter of their own. When Fred is 28, he meets 15-year-old Rosemary Lett, and the two fall in love. Rosemary's family is immediately suspicious of Fred.
We were all shocked and dismayed, really, because Fred was quite a bit older than Rosemary, quite scruffy looking, and his first impressions when you tried to make a conversation with him was he was an out-and-out liar.
The family has no idea Fred is still married to Rena.
We only found that out some months later, when there were various other things that kept cropping up that we were finding out about. The one was his marriage. There was another one about he had been in prison.
Soon, Rena disappears, and then her first daughter, Charmaine, also vanishes. Fred claims they moved to Scotland.
Charmaine, we was told, preferred to be with her mother, and that was the reason why she disappeared. And Scotland was a very long way away at the time, although we loved Charmaine, all of us, dearly. But it was maybe a little bit strange that she suddenly wanted to go back, and not to say cheerio.
Rena and Charmaine's murdered bodies are found years later. Meanwhile, the West's neighbor, Liz Agius, notices Fred and Rosemary's unusual lifestyle.
As I got to know Rosemary and Fred West, Rose started telling me about her personal life. How did I feel about it? She was a prostitute. I just told her what, it was her business, it was nothing to do with me. She did go into details that she had like microphones or something in the bedroom, because if she ever had clients there, Fred was always on the opposite side into the next room, and he likes to listen to things like that. Weird, absolutely weird, but their life, it was up to them to whatever I thought turned them on, and you know, I never took no notice really. I liked her for what she was, and you know, as a friend, what she did in her own business, or in her own life.
Liz quickly grows nervous about Fred.
Well, he started off a casual conversation like, how are you, where have you been? And then as time went by, it got to sex. He always talked about sex. He used to say to me, what I could do with you in bed, would I like to try it with him? If I like, I can have 3 in the bed, him, Rose, and myself. How would I feel like if I went on the game? It was just sex, 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 sex mad.
Before long, it becomes clear that there are troubling things happening at the West's home.
He said to me that he likes to go around finding young girls so that because they've run away, they've got no home, he will support them by giving them a roof over their heads, and if they want to go on the game, work for him. Then one day, Rose knocked on the door. She said she was going out with Fred. And I said, well, why are you going with him, you know? And she turned around and said to me, so long as there's a woman in the car with a male, there's always an easy chance for another girl who they're going to pick up will get inside the car, because she will be there with him.
In the cellar of the West home, young victims are subjected to brutal sexual assaults. After binding them and taping their mouths shut, the Wests carry out acts of sexual perversion and torture. Some of the victims die in the process. Others cannot be allowed to live. Fred hints at what's going on to his neighbor when he shows her his cellar.
We went down there. And Fred said he wasn't sure what to make of this yet. He said, I don't know whether to make it a playing area for the children. Or he nudged me and he used to say, or else I could make this into my torture room and things like that. He said, just think, he said, what I could do to you down here if he said, nobody will hear me. He said, because I'd make it soundproof. And I used to say, keep wishing. Once me and Rose was I was in the, what they call the sitting room, but there was beds as well inside there, in this room. I was sitting on the settee, Rose was making a cup of tea. And the next thing, Fred came behind from the door, put these handcuffs on me, and I was quite nervous on it, and then Rose turned around and said, get them friggin' off her, just like that. And without any hesitation, he took them off. He said, I was only joking.
Still, the neighbor doesn't comprehend what's going on in the West home.
All I knew is that Rose was a prostitute, and they both had other women as prostitutes, but I didn't see any. It was only what they told me. I didn't know they was going to kill anybody or torture anybody. You wouldn't have thought that they were the type of couple to have done that.
It's not hard to understand her not knowing the truth, because what's actually happening in the home of Fred and Rosemary West is simply beyond comprehension. Deadly duo Fred and Rosemary West are systematically torturing and killing young women in the cellar of their home at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucestershire, England. The address is soon to become the most notorious in Great Britain, as the West's killing spree has gone undetected for over 20 years. Like many serial killers, both Fred and Rosemary endured violent, abusive childhoods. Rosemary was the fifth of 7 children. People found her slow, and she had trouble making friends. On the surface, the family seemed ordinary, but in fact, there was terrible abuse. Rosemary and her brothers and sisters suffered frequent beatings at the hands of their tyrannical father, Bill Lett, who was a diagnosed schizophrenic.
He was a madman, complete madman, when he was in these rage of temper fits, whatever.
Nobody was excluded from it, my mother included. And we all lived under this threat of what he would do next.
Fred and Rosemary form an inseparable bond, a devoted connection forged in murder.
Always happy, always pretty little thing, yeah. And then one day she wasn't there anymore.
Over the years, the couple is investigated, but charges are never filed, despite the fact that the police suspect links between the growing number of missing women.
So in police circles and local gossip between police officers strongly believe that one person is responsible for all of those killings, and the presumption is that person would be local. Serial killer, well, that wasn't a word bandied about in the 70s, but yes, you could call it that it was quite firmly believed that one person was responsible and that he could well have been a local person. But who that person was, well, we didn't know it was Fred West, that's for sure.
The sort of youngsters staying at Cromwell Street are the ideal victims, many of them having just recently left home.
They were like me, you know. They most probably didn't have a lot of money and they were probably enjoying life to the full. Maybe they didn't have their relatives close by. Maybe they'd fallen out with their family for some particular reason. Very much the same as myself.
I think we will find that we will actually notice clusters. And when I say clusters, we will notice that in one particular area there are more people going missing than other areas, and it could point the finger that there's something not quite right there.
Over a 20-year span, the Wests torture, murder, and bury 9 young women at the Cromwell Street home, including their own daughter. It seems astonishing now that they managed to do it without anyone noticing.
No child protection service in the United Kingdom, in the then state of knowledge and the procedures which then applied, could have anticipated or avoided this terrible set of tragedies.
These two went to extraordinary lengths to prevent detection, and I think we need to keep that in mind and not look and try and second-guess people who were perhaps doing the best they could in difficult circumstances in the past.
Apparently, police missed a valuable clue when a video store owner reported Fred peddling deviant sex tapes.
He said he actually made them in his house, and he said he'd done some involving his daughters. They were sex videos and lesbian romps and different things like that. And then he got into a conversation, had I heard of snuff movies, the actual real snuff movies, where they actually done it. And I couldn't understand that a man could talk to somebody about things like that. So when I got home, we talked it over, and I phoned the police the next morning, and I gave him the name and the address, and he said it would be investigated.
Heather, the West's second oldest daughter, was about to become the last known victim in 1987. Liz Agius could have been next on the list.
I look at it that I am one of the lucky people to be alive today, because when I think about it, I think, were they trying to find out if I was going to be one of the people that if they picked on me, would I be missed?
Finally, in 1994, the couple is caught. But Rosemary denies any involvement.
She was devastated, quite clearly distressed and shocked.
She denies she knew anything about the bodies, is that correct?
Yes, she does.
What does she say about knowledge of the killings at all? She totally denies that.
Yes, she does.
But I find it very hard to believe that she lived in that house and didn't know what was going on.
In the face of the evidence, Rosemary is sentenced to 10 life sentences, one for each victim killed, including Charmaine.
This morning, Rosemary West was charged with the murder of Charmaine West between the 1st of May 1971 and the 31st of December 1971.
By the end, it appears that the relationship between this killer couple has changed.
I would have said Rose was the more dominant. It was obvious that he was very, very much in love with her. He loved her. The way things were, he would have done everything and anything for her.
Rose had changed then. I mean, she got more domineering then. She got this...
Secretive.
No, no. Secretive, and
yeah.
What she said went, and that was it.
On January 1st, 1995, Fred West commits suicide, rather than face the same sentence as his wife. He strangles himself in his prison cell. Today, researchers are hoping that tools like the serial killer database may eventually help reduce the frequency of serial killers.
So if we can identify these variables, we can identify these killers at early ages if we see these behaviors and take remedial action immediately by which to preempt any further activity in the future.
The hope is to never have monsters like Fred and Rosemary West at large in the world.
I punish myself every day for it, for not asking enough questions, for just not finding out more and maybe stopping it before it happened.
I can't forgive because Rosemary knew right from wrong. I'm her brother, but I can't possibly forgive anyone for cruelty to children, let alone murders.